This video is brought to you by Skillshare. More on them later in the episode. Famous cartoon characters if they were on the Suicide Squad was one of two options that I floated out for my subscribers to vote on for today's video, and it dominated the other option, which really I wasn't disappointed with because I was pretty excited to do this video. After seeing the trailers for the new Suicide Squad movie along with the Space Jam trailer, felt like an idea that would be pretty good to do for today. And working with famous cartoon characters means I can pull from some characters that I loved as a kid that I haven't gotten to use on the channel yet. So let's get into some edgy, super villainous redesigns of some classics, shall we? Let's go. Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. Many teams of superpowered people have rotating rosters of members, but few change as frequently as Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad. Because the group is made up of convicted felons taking on deadly covert missions to try and knock time off their prison sentences, few members last more than a few rounds. Today we'll look at some of the most lethal past members. First up is a woman who spent her high school years working as an upstanding, well-respected hero. Kim Possible worked alongside her somewhat bumbling partner, Ron Stoppable, to put away many villains. In their early days, many of Kim and Ron's regular foes weren't particularly lethal, but being put away time and time again by the young heroes made some of them grow desperate. Along with that, by the time Kim got to university age, she started to wonder, if her villains always managed to escape prison, did she need to take more drastic measures to really stop them for good? It was a question every hero faces at some point, and for Kim, unfortunately, all it took to push her over the edge was one bad day. Kim and Ron were after a couple of their most regular foes, Dr. Draken and his muscle, Shigo. But this time the villains weren't messing around. While Draken distracted Kim with one of his many villainous monologues, Shigo went straight for Kim's weak link. With a single jab of her glowing green fist, she punched straight through Ron, killing him instantly. That finally made Kim snap. She stopped holding back and retaliated by killing both Shigo and Draken. The authorities let it slide this time, as they knew how much good Kim had done for the world in her life, but soon she'd do enough that they couldn't cover it up anymore. She began hunting down and slaying all of her past foes, one by one, but her big mistake came when she followed the trail of one of her villains to Gotham City. Monkey Fist was hiding there when Kim found and killed him, but another hero had been keeping an eye on the villain. Batman saw the killing and fought to take down Kim. The fight wasn't easy for him, as she was a very skilled hero, but he did eventually manage to restrain her and hand her over to the authorities. Her prison sentence would have been lessened due to her heroic past, but Amanda Waller pulled some strings in secret to ensure a lengthy sentence, having other things in mind for the violent hero. Waller ensured that Kim was transferred to Belle Reve, with multiple life sentences. Then, she came to Kim about Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad. Obviously wanting to keep doing heroic work, even well behind bars, Kim agreed, becoming one of the most consistent members of the squad. But if she ever finds out what Waller did to ensure that she'd be a member of the team, there will be little to be done to stop Kim from getting vengeance once again. Next up is another past hero, but this one was far younger than Kim Possible when she started turning violent. Buttercup was one of 3 girls created by a mad scientist who'd made them after the death of his daughter. He wanted children who would never die on him, so he manufactured 3 metahuman girls to fill the hole in his heart. But being made with superhuman abilities would just mean the girls were compelled to use their powers against foes as strong as themselves. Blossom led her sisters, Bubbles and Buttercup, in protecting their city against all kinds of supervillain threats, and they worked fairly well together for a few years. But as they got older, one of the girls got more and more tired of taking orders. Buttercup began arguing so much with Blossom that eventually she'd had enough and she left the family at only 13 years old to go off heroing on her own. But what she was doing would only really be heroing for a short while. Eventually, she found people that were willing to pay her good money to do specific hero missions for them, but quickly the tasks became less and less heroic. By the time she was 15, Buttercup was simply a metahuman for hire to do whatever her clients needed. She'd hunt down vigilantes, aid in robberies, and even invade sovereign nations if the price was high enough. With her myriad of abilities from super strength and speed and flight to heat vision and supersonic screams, there was little her victims could do to protect themselves if Buttercup was after a bounty on their head. Buttercup would move from city to city, avoiding staying in one place for too long to stay off the radars of any one hero or team. But when she eventually made her way to Jump City, she very quickly caught the attention of that area's saviors. The Teen Titans found her taking jobs for Brother Blood and did all they could to bring her down. It was finally Starfire, whose powers were comparable to Buttercup's, who finally managed to restrain her. Despite her age, she was deemed by courts to be dangerous enough to be incarcerated like an adult. Then, as she'd done many times before, Amanda Waller saw a powerful metahuman being imprisoned and ensured she was transferred to Belle Reve. Now, Buttercup continues to fight for a price, but the currency has changed. Each mission she takes knocks years off her prison sentence, but if she wears them down enough to finally be free, will she go back to her life of crime, or will she try to reconcile with her sisters and once more become a hero? Only time will tell. Quick interruption here for anybody that's looking to get better at drawing, or creative writing, or graphic design, photography, filmmaking, pretty much anything creative. See, the sponsor of today's video is Skillshare, an online learning community with thousands of classes made for creative people just like you to hone your skills and get better at your craft. They've got everything you're looking to learn. Want to become a better illustrator? Take Mastering Illustration, Sketching, Inking, and Color Essentials by the godfather of YouTube art channels himself, Jazza. Want to learn to draw animals and creatures specifically the way that I did? Take my personal favorite course, Drawing Animals from Anatomy to Rendering by Jeffrey Jacobs. Or maybe you even want to learn to make YouTube videos like this. If so, you can take Marquez Brownlee's class, YouTube Success, Script, Shoot, and Edit with MKBHD. There's no ads, and they're always making new and awesome classes for you to try your hand at. And because they're sponsoring today's video, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership. And once you've tried it out and realized how much you love it, it's less than $10 a month on an annual membership. So give it a go if you haven't, but for now, let's get back into more of my artwork, shall we? Let's go. Now, this next case is one of the more unfortunate stories, because life never really gave this so-called villain a chance. Winnie had been born a bizarre metahuman with an unfortunate mutation. He looked like a golden bear, and his parents had rejected him at birth. He wandered from the roadside he'd been left on to a forest where he grew up foraging for food. He was essentially growing up as the wild animal his parents had seen him as, only interacting with humans again later in life, when hunters came to his woods shooting deer. When he saw the species that had abandoned him hunting residents of his 100-acre home, he flew into a rage and mauled them all. He'd continued to do so for years until he eventually came across a different kind of human wandering the woods. He spotted a young boy who was stumbling around confused and scared. Winnie slowly approached him, and when the boy saw, he didn't run or scream or hide or any of that. The boy simply approached Winnie and asked him for help. He couldn't find his way home. Winnie was somewhat alarmed, but since the boy posed no threat, he picked him up and carried him to the edge of the woods. The boy thanked him and ran off, but then the next day, he returned. And the next day, and the one after that. The boy, who eventually introduced himself as Christopher, kept coming back to spend time with Winnie. He was even the one who gave him his name, and on top of that, he'd frequently bring the bear man food, eventually finding that Winnie had a near addictive love of honey. The two would become close friends, and Christopher would even teach him some English, which he'd never had the opportunity to learn, spending his days around only animals prior to this. But one day hunters came to the woods again, and this time they were specifically looking for the creature who'd mauled so many other hunters. They came and found Winnie while he was spending time with Christopher, but the hunters couldn't see the boy behind the giant golden bear. They all began to fire, and Winnie did all he could to protect Christopher. He kept him alive, but when a bullet grazed the boy's arm, Winnie saw red. He charged the hunters and began tearing into them. It was mayhem that only stopped when, through the terror, Winnie heard Christopher screaming. He turned to see the boy was horrified by what Winnie was doing. Christopher ran, and Winnie just stopped. One of the hunters had managed to escape and called the police, who returned to the spot where Winnie still sat. They arrested the bear, and he was put in Belle Reve. There he was offered missions alongside the Suicide Squad, which he accepted. For once in his life, he finally had a goal: learn to be more civilized while working to reduce his sentence, so he could one day be released to go find Christopher and apologize for making him witness such a massacre. Hopefully that could mend the only friendship he'd ever had. Of course, it would be easier said than done, as becoming more civilized in his present company wouldn't be the easiest task. The next case is one of the most bizarre ones, and it's still not fully understood if this villain is being kept in prison because the security is truly good enough to contain him, or if he's simply staying behind bars because he chooses to, for now. Bugs Schlesinger, more commonly referred to as Bugs Bunny, has somewhat similar metahuman mutations to Winnie, but, as you may have guessed from his name, he resembles a rabbit, and his abilities don't stop with his speed or leaping that he has as a result of his altered body. He is also a master of disguise, seemingly always having some kind of change of outfit on him. More perplexing still, despite his obvious rabbit appearance, he somehow always fools whoever he's targeting with his change of looks. Some have theorized that he's some kind of trickster demigod, or potentially some kind of imp from another dimension, like Mr. Myxlplyx or the Batmite. He can seemingly warp reality to his whims, spontaneously creating holes in the ground to escape through, spawning animals and objects from nowhere, stretching his limbs, flattening himself out, and just generally surviving any kind of damage without a scratch. The only way he was actually able to be apprehended was when the Suicide Squad themselves were sent to kill him. They were unable to do so, but when he saw the team and decided they'd be a fun group to torment for a while, he allowed himself to be taken in to join their ranks. Like the rest of them, Waller thinks she planted an explosive in his neck to keep him from escaping, but in reality he used his trickster abilities to have her plant the bomb in the neck of one of the guards Bugs found particularly irritating. Now it seems he's only working with the team until he grows bored of them and decides to move on. And while he can be a massive help on missions because of his abilities, he also uses them sporadically and unpredictably. He's not a team member who can be relied on in the long term, and there's no way of knowing how much longer he'll spend on Task Force X. This might seem like a big call because I really liked how last week's 2 dragon videos turned out, but I think this is my favorite episode I've made in a while. I guess I kinda realized during the Greek demigods, if they were in the post-apocalypse episode, that I really like doing sorta grungy, punky kinda sci-fi-ish designs, and this sorta leaned into that. So maybe I should try doing more stuff like this and like that episode. If you've got ideas for grungy, superhero-ish, sci-fi kind of episodes, leave them in the comments below. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed this, I highly recommend checking out my Disney Princesses as Supervillains episode. That one is very similar to this one. And then I got lots of other stuff on the channel like this, drawing superheroes and monsters, dragons, Transformers, all kinds of stuff like that. But anyway, everybody, that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.